If you're struggling to function effectively because you're going through a relationship breakup or divorce, or even a career breakdown, then you've come to the right place. I'm about to show you how your mind behaves, or more like misbehaves, in that initial period after a relationship ends, and what you can do about it. I'll do that by introducing a mindfulness-based framework, and I promise it's one you won't have seen anywhere else. I'm Neil Bierbaum, and I help men to grow stronger and live deeper. First, I'm going to show you the framework so you can see what's happening to your mind while you're going through the heat of the breakup. Then I'll show you how to apply that framework so that you can work with it in the many different and challenging scenarios that you're about to face. So let's get into it. This is your mind during a breakup. Here you are in the present moment. That's where you live. But we don't pay much attention to that. Our minds are elsewhere. We can drive home from work and not pay attention, not remember what songs were on the stereo, not remember which lights were red or green. It's kind of like we're at home, but we're scrolling on our phones, so we're not really at home. And while this is going on, your mind is in one of two places. The past, which is where the relationship was in this case, and the future, where the relationship isn't or might not be. And while your mind is there, it's making judgments. Judgments about the past, things that were good, the reasons why you got together and stayed together, and judgments about things that were not good, the reasons why you broke up. Then it jumps to thoughts about the future, the terrifying possibility that you might never find someone like her again, that you might be all alone, lose your friends, never see your children, all of those things. Maybe at some point there's a glimmer that there might be someone else on the horizon, so that's a positive judgment about the future. But that doesn't last long, and suddenly you're back into the past. And so this process goes on all day, with your mind jumping between what we can say are categories of thought. There's past positive, which is nostalgia. All those laughs you had, the great times, the holidays you took, whatever it might be. Then there's past negative, all the fights you had, the things you didn't see eye to eye on, the things that caused the breakup, the things she said, the things you said. So in this corner, wearing the white trunks, is blame and regret. This is the stuff that has you waking up at 4 a.m, trying to unmake what happened, wishing you hadn't said those things, or trying to find a way to win the argument and convince her that you're right. Then there's future negative, which is where all hope is lost, and you're worried about what people might find out about you, what they might say, what that might mean for your social circle. Or worse, you're worried about not finding someone else or not finding the right person. Even worse, maybe you're worried that you won't get to see your kids, or you're worried about the impact that all this is having on them. Then there's future positive, when it crosses your mind that in fact, maybe that wasn't the ideal partner after all, and now that you're not with them, not with her, maybe you'll find somebody who doesn't have those traits, who is going to come down from heaven and turn this nightmare into a fairy tale. Then you wake up and you go back to blame and regret. And so it goes on and on, all day and all night. And where's the one place that you're not? In the present, where life happens, where you can deal with stuff, where you can take action, or not take action and just ride the wave, wait for things to pass, which is what you should be doing. Because in the present moment, you discover that none of these thoughts are real. This is something my 4-year-old son knew. He walked into my office one day, and I had something about this written up on the flip chart, and he said, "What does that say, Dad?" So I read him the sentence, and it had the word future in it. And he said, "I know what the future is." I said, "What?" He said, "It's just thoughts." I said, "Don't forget that, because you'll pay a lot of money to find out again when you're older." Of course, later on, when he was a teenager, and again as a young adult, he's been through a couple of breakups. And during that time, of course, he forgot. Then he went into his head and experienced all the suffering that comes from being in that bad neighborhood. And as you can see, your mind is a bad neighborhood. It's full of unhelpful thoughts and feelings, which are the consequence of judgments, which are not based on reality. What do I mean by that? Well, if you pay attention, a lot of those future possibilities that you think about never happen. If they did, you'd be very good at manifesting. I think about something, and the next day it's there. But we know that that's not your experience. And even the stuff you remember, if I had to ask the other person, they would probably see it differently. So there's no real truth in memory either. So our thoughts are not entirely reliable. And especially not now when you're going through a breakup or divorce. If your mind was a dodgy neighborhood before, it's become a bad one now. And what should you do when you find yourself in a bad neighborhood? get yourself out as quickly as possible. And how do you do that? Well, first you recognize that this is what's going on, all the stuff I've pointed to. And how do you recognize that? This is a key question, because when you're there, you're the last one to know. You can spend hours, even days, trying to win an argument in your head, or trying to figure out how to change what's been done in the past, or what can be done about the future. And then one day you wake up and you realize that most or all of that mental effort was a waste of time, because life took an entirely different direction anyway. And so that's the business of what's going on in your mind, and it's useful to be aware of. And I'll show you now. We'll move to the second part, which is how to apply this framework in a practical way so that you can get out of that bad neighborhood, get out of your mind, because that is the goal, to get out of your mind. And I don't mean out of your mind, I mean out of your head. And to get out of your head means to be present. To be present means to have your attention on something real that's right in front of you, like a task. And that's what you're finding so hard to do right now, because your mind is in full-on emergency mode. And that's what we're working to fix. When you're present, you're not swimming around in imagination, arguing with yourself or the other person in your head. When you're present, you immerse yourself in reality. You put yourself in the best possible position to deal effectively with a situation by making responsive and not reactive decisions based on what's real and what matters. Notice those words, responsive and reactive. When you become aware of being in that bad neighborhood, you pause and redirect your attention and ultimately your actions, your behavior, in the way that I'm going to show you shortly. If you don't become aware, then you react. To react means a knee-jerk reaction where you act with no choice. You just find yourself doing something that you will probably end up wishing you hadn't, or wishing you could stop yourself. Think about when you get angry. You don't plan it, you just do it. Then you think back and wish you could have acted differently. You wish you could have chosen a different option. So there's the key. No choice means to react. To pause and consciously choose your next move is to respond. And here's how you get there. I call it presencing and grounding yourself. So the first thing you can do when you recognize that you're in one of those zones is to treat the situation as it's occurring in your brain. So your brain is treating this thing like it's a life or death matter, like it's the end of the world. And so it's in an amygdala hijack. It's in that fight or flight response. And so you need to address it directly. And so how do you do that? Well, one good way is to just literally look out the window, look at the sky, see that the sun is still in the sky. The sun hasn't fallen out of the sky hasn't fallen on your head, and it's actually not the end of the world. And this may sound funny, but you're actually addressing the issue as it occurs in your brain. You're also externalizing to the external environment and getting out of your head, out of your imagination. And you can continue this by bringing your attention into the room. You pay attention to the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Notice them. Probably 5 minutes ago, you weren't aware that they were even there. Now notice them, look at them. And notice that they're still standing strong. The world has not ended, and they will probably still be there, even if your worst thoughts come to pass. And you can bring your attention further into maybe the light in the room. Notice the light and the different degrees of light, shade and light and dark, just paying attention to it. Maybe the temperature in the room. Is there an air conditioner? What is the temperature? Is the air moving? Are there any sounds? And so by doing this, you're externalizing, you're getting your attention out of your head, not following down those rabbit holes and those dark paths, and you're starting to pay attention to what's real. You can support it with some deep breathing. If you know any breathing exercises, that's very good. And we know that when your mind is in that emergency state, your breathing gets shallow, and that sends a further signal to your brain that there's an emergency going on. So it's very effective to consciously and deliberately take deep breaths and slow down your breathing, especially on the exhale. If you want to take this a little bit further, pay attention to the furniture in the room and the things on the furniture. Maybe you're in your office and you look at your desk and you see your computer and your coffee cup and your photograph and your printer and all of those things. And really pay attention to them, the color, the texture, what they're made of. Stuff that you haven't noticed, haven't thought about because you were so much in your head. And something else, if you want to take it even further, is to notice how still everything is in the room. Like if you weren't there, nothing would move. It would be absolutely still. The room would be silent. And that's a very powerful step, because then you get to see how much noise is going on inside your head. So once you've done that for a few minutes, and this is literally can take you 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and you'll be feeling a lot calmer, a lot more grounded. And the next step then is to respond, there's that word again, by dealing with the next most important thing in your life. Because chances are you won't be able to deal with whatever that issue is related to the breakdown right now. You might be at work. It's not something that's going to be resolved in the next 24 hours, and you need to get on with your life. So you take your attention and you focus on the next most important thing in your life, which probably is a work task. And one caveat about this approach, this is not intended as something to justify escaping, avoiding, or running away from dealing with your thoughts or emotions. It's about not following pointless or unproductive or reactive paths that are not consciously chosen, paths that are not deliberately considered. Because when you do that, go down those paths not considered, you end up spending too much time in those bad neighborhoods. You end up moving in and building a home there. You don't want that. This process is about getting yourself calm and present so that you can address issues objectively and realistically at a time when you're in the headspace to do that. Then you very much want to go and pay a deliberate visit to the nostalgia, the blame, the regret, the anxiety, and the hope/fantasy neighborhoods. And when you do that, you want to take a good look around, make a realistic assessment, allocate some life force to dealing with them, and then do so in a responsible, reflective, and responsive, not reactive way. And here's how you catch yourself going into and hanging out in those bad neighborhoods. There are 4 indicators to look out for: behaviors, cognitions, emotions, and physical symptoms. Behaviors are things like scrolling endlessly through pictures of holidays. That would indicate that you're stuck in nostalgia. Or getting up at 4 in the morning to write that angry email that's going to win you that argument. When you see yourself doing those things, that's your red flag, your alarm clock, your indicator that warns you that you're in a bad neighborhood. Stop acting in that direction. Don't do the thing. Do something else. Anything. Okay, not anything, but you know what I mean. The second category is cognitions. Those are the things we've looked at, those categories of thought that were on the slide earlier. And how you'll recognize them is through repeated phrases that you say to yourself via that voice in your head. Things like, how dare she? Which indicates that you're going into the blame neighborhood. Or you might hear yourself saying, if only, which would indicate that you're moving into the regret neighborhood. Let's look next at the emotions category. There are 5 broad categories of emotion. Sad, which is obvious. Bad, meaning guilty, which points to regret. Mad, meaning angry. With others would indicate blame, or with yourself would indicate regret again. Then glad, which you might feel sometimes, and then you might feel bad for feeling glad. Another category of emotion is afraid, which points to anxiety, and then hopeful, which we hope is realistic and not fantasy. And so again, you can notice when you're experiencing one of these emotions and check whether it's productive and useful at that time. And finally, we can look at physical symptoms as indicators of when we're going to a bad neighborhood. So that might be things like tension headaches, stomach ailments like cramps or heartburn, skin conditions like a rash, anything physical that could be stress-related. Don't discount how much of an impact an intense stress event can have on the body. So your job right now, and you can pause the video or make sure to do it right after, is to identify and write down what your unique indicators are. Those 4 categories we've just looked at, and try to find one in each of those categories. Really do the work, because this is going to help you to spot them fast and either not go into the neighborhood or quickly get out of it when you find yourself there. So reflect on that. What are your behaviors? Are you the one scrolling to indicate nostalgia, or the one writing the angry email at 4 in the morning, or something else? What is your cognition? What are the things that you say, either internally to yourself or verbally to the people who you're talking to in processing this? What is the emotion that you feel, and what are the physical symptoms? The second task that you're going to do right now while you pause the video or right after watching is to draw up a quadrant on a piece of paper and stick it up, or onto a whiteboard or flip chart if you have one. Then, when you become aware that you're doing or experiencing any of those things that are on your indicators list, those behaviors, thoughts, emotions, or physical symptoms that you've just marked up, and maybe you'll discover a few more along the way, then you do this. First, you go and place a tick or a cross into whichever quadrant you find yourself in. the past positive if it's nostalgia, the past negative if it's blame or regret, the future negative if it's anxiety, and the future positive if it's wild hope and fantasy. And you use ticks for the positive and crosses for the negatives. And you might think, well, why do we record ticks even though they're positive? Because they're still judgments. And judgments are the real core of the problem. And positive judgments can lead us onto a fantasy path. So we still want to mark them up. So if you found yourself scrolling through old photographs, that would be nostalgia, that's past positive, and so you go place a tick there. You find yourself getting up at 4 a.m. to write that angry email and set the record straight, that's blame, so you go and put a cross in the past negative quadrant. Or another way you can do it is to write the category of thought onto a post-it and stick that up. So again, scrolling through those photos, that's nostalgia, you scribble nostalgia onto the post-it and you go and stick it in the past positive quadrant. You get up to write that email, write blame onto the post-it and stick it into the past negative quadrant. Then, having done that, you presence and ground yourself in the way that we've learned and put your attention on the next most important thing in your life. And you keep doing this until it becomes a habit, until you no longer need to write it down, until it becomes second nature to recognize what neighborhood you're in and exit immediately. I'm sure you can already see how this can extend into other areas of your life and how it provides the foundation for a whole new way of being. And that is being present, responding and not reacting, and focusing on what's real and what matters instead of on what's imagined. There's a lot that can flow from that. For starters, your life will be a whole lot simpler and you'll become a force for clarity instead of drama. You'll also develop presence as an innate quality, and you know what they say about men with presence. And much more, which I'll leave you to explore and discover for yourself. And if you're just starting out with me, I hope you can see and appreciate some of the MAP for Men pillars in action. MAP stands for Mindset, Accountability, and Purpose. In this video, we built on the mindset pillar in terms of being aware and learning to manage your attention. And we touched on the accountability pillar in terms of being responsive and deliberate instead of reactive in dealing with things. I would love for you to return in a few days or weeks and comment on how this worked out for you. It might be time then for you to take in the next video in the series on breakups, which is about the do's and don'ts of that early breakup phase. Or you could do that now. If it's been published by the time you see this, you'll find the link to the next video over here. If this helped you to think differently about growing stronger and living deeper, hit like and subscribe and that notification button, and maybe you know someone you could share it with. Check out some of my other videos and let me know in the comments what area of growth you're facing a challenge with right now that you'd like me to address. And remember, you're not just a man, you're a man growing stronger and living deeper.